Hey guys, Mark Allen, BHSpringSolutions LLC and BHSpringSolutions.com, back again for another session of High Power University. And of course, you can't mistake what you're looking at here on the table. This is a BH Beauty contest, and anticipation has been building about this for a very, very long time, we know. And that is completely not true. This is not a beauty contest. It would not be fair whatsoever. Today, we're going to talk specifically about the imperfect science of taking a correct trigger brake weight. And this is one actually that the owner of the shop where BH Service Custom Shop Service Department is located at TC Custom Coatings LLC. The owner there, he's an 18-year gunsmith, and this one kind of stumped him this morning, and it's what kind of made me think of this as a High Power University session. And as I start this, this could get to be a very, very long video, and I want to try not to let that happen. But I'm venturing into a subject that can really be a little strenuous sometimes for some guys when it comes down to exactly how to take a trigger brake weight reading. And boy, there's lots and lots and lots and lots of differences of opinion out there. At least I've come in contact with a lot of them. We're going to be talking about and using a Lyman scale today and the nuances of that one. There's certainly multiple different options in trigger brake weight scales. However, the things that we're going to be talking today about are not so much having to do with the scale as the nuances of a couple of different models, being 1911s and high powers and two different high power triggers, and how this impacts or manipulates a scale. And I'm actually going to show you here on this high power. I'm going to show you how we can scale this high power's trigger at 3-something pounds, 5-something pounds, and 7-something pounds. And we're not going to be making any edits or changing any springs or nothing like that. I want to purposely keep the video running while we show that. Because I think it's going to be a little bit eye-opening, might be a little concerning to some people. As well, but here we go. Trigger brake weight measurement. Here's a 1911. Has what I consider to be probably the easiest trigger brake to scale, and that being because it has a very straight back, as you're going to see, pure straight back trigger brake, and short. That's a particularly easy trigger brake weight to scale. The Lyman scale instructions say start with the hook part of the scale right as you see it there, in front but not touching, and then slow and steady rearward pressure. Marcus has to remember he has a 1911 in his hand and depress that beaver tail or it'll get very heavy. That time I pulled quite slow, 6 pounds, 11 ounces. I want to show you what happens if we do a less slow, but still slow and steady trigger brake. 4 pounds, 12.8 ounces. And let's say we just want to do it a little quicker. 3 pounds, 4.6 ounces. Yeah, so that gets a little confusing, doesn't it? The instructions that come with the Lyman scale, let's take a look at those. For best results, keep the trigger in trigger rod parallel with the bore of the gun while taking readings. A slow, steady pull is best. Once the trigger releases, which is right here, stop pulling and the display will show the weight of that pull. So once the trigger releases, stop pulling, so you can't continue pulling. I'm assuming that the slow and steady is so you don't over pull, so that when the trigger brake happens, you can actually stop and immediately at that point. But what I've noticed is that the longer, the slower. This is not like one of those things that gets more accurate, like a little is good, lots better. Not in the case of this, I don't think, because I'm going to show you one more time on this 1911. Very slow, very steady. Watch that scale. Oh my goodness, we're going to have a 7 pound, 3.5 ounce 1911 trigger pull. this is not a 7-pound. That is just not true. We're going to do it one more time. 6 pounds, 4.5 ounces. And we'll get a little bit quicker. 4 pounds, 2.9 ounces. This particular scale, you can do 10 trigger pulls, then hit average as long as you've pressed clear to clear the memory in advance, and you can get an average. My belief is a slow, steady, but consistent pull so that the slowness or the quickness of that pull is such that I can release and stop as immediately as possible when that trigger break happens. And to answer the question right up front, okay, well, how do we do that? How do we measure these things in the BH Custom Shop Service Department? Well, we do it by the average method, but in terms of the pull and the speed or the slowness of the pull, right in the middle of what you were seeing me demonstrate. In other words, you saw me in the 6-7 pound range, you saw it in the 3 and the 4 pound range, you saw the 5 pound range. That 5 pound range I consider to be the least manipulated, or the trigger pulls that were coming in the 4 to 5 pound range, I would consider to be the least manipulated of all. They were not happening too fast. They were not happening, with this deliberate slowness, while I'm watching basically, the speed at which I'm pulling manipulate the scale. I believe it to be right kind of in the middle. Here is, let's go to the BH Advanced Masterpiece first. We have the BH Advanced Trigger Subassembly. You're going to notice the position of the trigger in the trigger guard. That is compared to the original high power trigger, which is farther forward. And you do have this kind of upward angle of that trigger. That one makes that one a little bit more difficult. You'll notice in the BH Advanced Trigger Subassembly, as we take a look at those two triggers, the positioning inside the trigger guard is extremely similar. And the angle of the trigger is extremely similar. And the straight back of the trigger pull motion is also very similar. This particular trigger subassembly in a high power is particularly easy to take a trigger break weight reading, no more difficult than on a 1911. The secret being moderate slowness forward or rearward, but continue, rearward wanting to do a trigger break. I'll show you how that would work here. We're going to go ahead and clear our scale, and we'll just do an average of, say, 5 trigger breaks. Just under 4 pounds. Four pounds, 14 ounces. 4 pounds, 7.7 ounces. 4 pounds, 0.3 ounce. And we'll do one more. 3 pounds, 13.6 ounces for an average of about 4 1/4, almost 4 1/4 pounds for the trigger break weight on that high power. And I do think that is quite realistic, and also this trigger, because of its angle, does also love the scale. This trigger does not love the scale. And I'm going to show you why, and it's easiest for me to show you why this trigger doesn't love the scale. I want to show you the full motion of the trigger. That's possible by going ahead and taking the slide off. Now we can see the whole motion of the trigger, and what that's going to allow you to do is take a look at the bottom of my finger in the proximity to the bottom of the trigger guard area. Now watch as I pull back. Did you see how the bottom of my trigger finger just got much closer to the bottom of the trigger guard? Yes. Now watch as we come back. And now it's farther away from the trigger guard again, and we pull down. So yes, that is a down and back trigger motion. No, that is not optimal. The trigger finger likes a straight back trigger pull. That's always the case. Down and back creates its own unique geometry for the trigger finger to handle, and so that's the way it is. So a lot of folks, I've had some folks who have made a point about the high powers trigger, that because it's like that, that it would be reasonable to pull at a slight angle to the bore like that. Now, you notice that was, again, a very slow trigger pull as I was talking. 6 pounds, 2 ounces. Now we'll do one kind of fast. Oh, and I'm going to go parallel with the barrel this time. Whoops, we didn't have our scale reset. £3, 0.1 ounce. And that was a very fast kind of a trigger pull. This is going to be the controlled, what I consider to be slow and reasonable. We'll go parallel with the barrel. 3 pounds, almost 4 pounds on that one. 5 pounds, 9.3 ounce. You notice that we've got a lot of kind of all over the place with this one compared to the Beauty Queen right below it, 4 pounds, 3.9 ounce. For you folks who would be new to High Power University, we'll show you the reason for that here real quickly. The one in my hand has the High Powers traditional operating system. And what I'm showing you here is, the size of the sear. And that sear engages, as you see, with the hammer. And you're going to see that right there. And the size of the sear is what I'm basically showing you here. And it's one of the reasons why the SFS system has become so popular for the high power. And it's because that sear has been redesigned. And now you're going to see the difference in the SFS. And we'll see if we can get these two side by side like that. There we go. You notice the sear on the right, much, much, much bigger than the sear on the left. When Léon Hubert designed the SFS system on the left, he needed a little bit more room for that part that has to do with the operating of the SFS features, and he smalled the sear down. When he smalled the sear down, we get much more consistency in the brake, the clear and much cleaner brake, hammer tooth to sear. And yeah, that's one of the reasons we tend to get more consistent trigger brake weight readings with the SFS system than with the traditional operating system, because we're literally clearing less metal. And that sometimes can be a little bit, for high power guys, a little bit confusing, especially when you're working with the traditional operating system and you seem to have this wide variety of brake weight readings. The thing that I can tell you that is, in my opinion, your best thing on a high power, and I'm going to demonstrate it here real quickly, because now just in this little short video you've watched me pull 7 something, I think, out of this one in my hand, 3 something out of this one in my hand, and honestly, neither one of those, with the spring setup that's in this hand, neither one of those are true. And so, what we want to do is, okay, well, what is it really? What is reasonable for us to actually believe this trigger pull is? Well, in my opinion, and I have tried the trigger pulls both ways, that would be straight back, parallel with the barrel, 5 pounds, 7 ounces. Now I'm going to angle the actual true, what this trigger does down and back, so to say. 5 pounds, 1 ounce. So, about a 6 ounce difference in those two. 5 pounds, 7.4. 5 pounds, 5.1. Now, I am deliberately trying to be very consistent. 4 pounds, 11.6. I'm trying to be very consistent in my rate of pull, or my slowness or fastness of the pull to the rear, and intentionally attempting to be very, very, very consistent. And what you saw there was quite consistent results. The gun is actually more consistent than the human behind the scale, usually. Anyway, but what I've shown you, and it's pretty hard to I think, have any argument with one thing. Yes, you can manipulate these scales. And if you want I believe the truest kind of a trigger pull reading, it is a consistent, yes, slow and steady, but it is a consistent pull. One of the things that was this morning that was really fouling up the owner of the building where our shop is, he was getting 7-pound trigger pull readings. And he was also noticing, this traditional operating system, you can have this part of the trigger brake where you pull to the rear and you pull just a little bit, right there. The trigger moved, the hammer did not fall. This we call trigger creep, and it is very common in the traditional operating system with that big sear needing to clear that big hammer. And that was really playing with this scale. In other words, the trigger actually moved, but it didn't break, so we kept pulling. But the resistance was, not staying consistent, because in that sense, when that's happening, it doesn't. So this sort of slowness was really letting the trigger and the nuances of the high powers trigger, which there are, many, and depending on which trigger subassembly you're using, and if you have a magazine disconnector, you don't. You've got some stuff in there that manipulates the resistance. That manipulation to the resistance, when you have a digital scale, I believe translates into a manipulated reading, because it's allowing the design basically to manipulate the scale. So hopefully that helps a little bit. The older high powers, or the older high power trigger subassembly, the trigger design, it is a difficult thing to scale accurately. There is no question about that, in my opinion. The BH Advanced trigger subassembly, as you can see, obviously easier to scale. It's a very pure kind of a straight back trigger pull, and that's, I think, what has made this so popular as well. I want to put one more thing at the end of this video, and what we're doing here is we're going to cover something that we covered in some previous video about the Gersan. One of the first videos that we did about the Gersan MCP35, we mentioned that the magazine locked up into the frame just extremely tight, and what that had the potential to cause is it had the potential to cause the breech to run into the back of the magazine. We actually had that happen, and the solution was to give a little bit of clearance right here. And what I don't want to mistake here, and we're going to try to actually see if we can actually demonstrate this. I think we're going to be able to. I want to differentiate this, and that is, you have some ammunition in a magazine, and that creates a different feeling when you insert the magazine into the handgun. And I want to show you what I mean here right now. When I push up now, it can feel like there is very little room. What's happening is I'm actually pushing up this round up into the bottom, or it is coming into contact with the bottom of the slide, and then the magazine spring is what's allowing me to press all the way in. In this sense, especially when you have a magazine that is fully loaded, as an example, it can feel, in any high power, frankly, a Gersan or otherwise, it can feel like what we demonstrated in that first session, I believe it was, on the Gersan, where the magazine just fit inappropriately tight. Now you're going to be able to see it's taking some effort there for me to press that magazine in. However, the relationship that we're talking about, and we were talking about in that first video, has to do with the magazine, not the ammunition and how everything feels when the magazine is full. We want to know just about the magazine. This particular magazine, that is good fit. We have not changed anything in the magazine, and we have not, or the magazine catch, we have not adjusted anything. We do not need to. That is enough margin. That is actually normal. It's actually very appropriate. Same brand magazine in this FN, and you can see that's just about the same as on the Gersan. It just can't be a scenario where you have to press all the way up and it doesn't have any kind of margin whatsoever. That's when we started running into the real problems of the breech running into the back of the magazine. Folks, thanks for watching. I'm Mark Allen, BH Spring Solutions LLC and BHSpringSolutions.com for High Power University.